We're cutting into programming with breaking news this morning in Columbia. Susan Smith is making her case for being released from prison on parole.
That's right. Smith has been in prison for 30 years for the murder of her 2 young sons. The Union mother initially said she'd been carjacked by a black man before she was later arrested and convicted, sentenced to life for then driving them into a lake.
Let's listen live to that hearing now.
Thank you.
One moment as all parties connect.
Ms. Brown Hennerhan, I do have a statement that I need to read into the record, please.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have received this correspondence. It is addressed to the Honorable Chair Kimberly Frederick, dated November 20th, 2024. Please be advised that I will recuse myself in the parole hearing of Susan Smith, number 221487. I was acting warden at Camille Graham Correctional Center in 1999, where inmate Smith was housed, and subsequently transferred to Leith Correctional Institution. I have determined that it is appropriate to recuse to eliminate any appearance of affecting her opportunity for parole. Respectfully, Geraldine P. Miro. Thank you, Mrs. Miro. This is accepted. If you would please exit the room. Thank you. Mrs. Miro has recused herself of this case and has exited the room. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have moved her site into the lobby briefly. And one moment as we admit all parties. There at Leith. Ma'am, confirming you are Miss Susan Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. And Attorney Tommy Thomas, are you able to hear us?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Thank you. And there at the support site, confirm you are here in support of Miss Susan Smith?
They're asking, can you hear? Yes, we can hear.
And you're here in support of Miss Smith?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you all for joining. You are before the board. Please wait for the chairman to address you.
Good morning, Ms. Smith. Good morning, Mr. Thomas, and good morning to the folks at Watkins. Thank you all for being here with us today. We hope everyone is doing well. Ms. Smith, I want you to know that we have received the packet of information that Mr. Thomas's office provided to us on your behalf, and we have reviewed that packet. So thank you for submitting that in advance of this hearing today. Mr. Thomas, are you going to begin, or is your client going to begin?
Yes, ma'am, I'll be glad to begin.
Yes, sir.
Members of the board, good morning. This is Susan Smith's parole hearing. This has probably been one of the most difficult cases that I have had to put together for a parole presentation. Just lots of different factors to consider. She's been convicted of murder, of course. She has served 30 years, and she was 23 at the time that this incident occurred. She was sentenced to life with the eligibility of parole, so that's why she is here today. I'm not really going to speak much about the crime. There are some things that I want to cover, and that's not out of disrespect. We were very concerned about that. Today is Susan's parole hearing, and so today is going to be about Susan, and I want to make sure that the things that are important not only to her but to this hearing and this board are presented, and I want to thank you in advance for your time to listen to everything. This story is really a mental health story. Some of this stuff, I've known Susan for a couple of years, and we've been working on this case. One of the things when I first met her was, of course, trying to kind of figure out some rhyme or reason as to, how these things have happened, and was able to find and have someone come to see her on a routine basis for counseling, and also to try to help her, through the daily things with Department of Corrections. As a result, that's kind of what I came to the conclusion was it is a mental health story. It's about the dangers of untreated mental health. It is about the lack of insight, the lack of diagnosis into mental health, and it's about stigmas, old stigmas. Of course, I'm 68 years old. I remember those. Hopefully, they're not as bad today. Susan was hospitalized as a young teen for a short period of time for mental health treatment. And not to disparage anybody, but her mom was telling folks that she was in the hospital because she had a strep infection. So those were things that we didn't talk about. Those were things that were pushed under the rug, so to speak, because they were embarrassing. They showed weakness. I don't know what they showed, but they showed up and culminated in Susan as a result of a day that all of this came together and produced some horrendous results. So I think it's important to Susan, if anything comes out of this hearing, it's that people understand there's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing and no reason not to reach out and seek treatment. And there is certainly no stigma that should be involved in trying to better yourself and help yourself for yourself and for others, members of the family and everyone. Susan, moving on, Susan is a high school graduate. She has some college with USC Union. She has attended International Christian College, and she's worked on an associate's degree. She's still actually working on that in Christian counseling. She has no prior record that I'm aware of. If paroled, she would be living with her brother, Scotty Vaughn. Scotty is here today and very briefly wanted to address the board. The job for her, she has served 30 years, so she's been in Department of Corrections for a long time, would be through vocational rehab. The PEP program is probation and parole, would know it. And we have made arrangements for aftercare with a licensed mental health professional. You have that information in the packet that's been provided to you. Some of the programs, I took the time to look at everything, to look at the programs that she's been involved in, and I'm not going to speak about all of those because you have those in the packet. The ones that I think are important and relevant today is the Self-Harmers Group. She has attempted to commit suicide on several different occasions within the Department of Corrections. 7 Habits, Beyond Abuse, Jumpstart, which she is a great fan of. She does not have a drug or alcohol addiction, thank goodness. She has been active on Endovo and the CipherWorks programs, Loss and Grief, healing seminars, women's empowerment, anger management, self-esteem, and domestic violence workshops. I normally, and I've presented a number of parole hearings, I first started with this thinking that it had to be different than normally what I would do as far as a presentation. And I came to the conclusion maybe this week, and it doesn't. I think it is, and I will stick with what I would normally do as far as the structure of my presentation. What I always begin with the board is contributing factors because I believe that's important. We need to know what was going on, why it was going on for the board to be able to make a informed decision about her parole expectations and her parole eligibility and what kind of candidate she is for parole. One of the things that has jumped out at me, and I saw this last night in the media, and I know that Susan wants to speak, and because she feels like it's important to get the truth out there, is this is not about the love for another man. I saw it on local TV about how this was all about another man and him not wanting children. From what I have been able to determine, that is just not true. I have spoken with David Bruck, who was a defense attorney on a number of different occasions. David has been a great source of information in regards to Susan. He indicated to me that this was a theory of a motive by the state. That's where we think it developed. However, this was never proven at trial, and it was actually abandoned by the state. So, but it has stuck. And I just wanted to, I know it's important to her to bring this to your attention. The contributing factors in this case were multiple stress points. They converged all at the same time. And we are certainly not trying to say anything about, you know, the horrificness of this crime. It is, and she was found guilty. But we're trying to kind of maybe present to the parole board how these things developed and how it's possible that something like this could happen. One of the things that has been important in her life, and I think is a huge contributor to this crime, is the suicide of her dad at age 6. Horrific, just horrific. And she blamed herself. How could he leave me? And I think it sets the stage for the beginning of some serious mental health issues, some serious depression, which just kind of culminates and continues to snowball. And the lack of, you know, recognition and treatment for this issue with her dad. I mean, it was like the old stigma of, you know, we just tough through these terrible situations, and, you know, that's how it's done. It's not done that way. There were some attempts to get some sort of psychological help for her after a couple of suicide attempts, and never went anywhere. She was the child. The adults in the picture did not, can't blame them, I think it was the times, did not seek and try to understand the depth and the significance of this and what it was going to produce at a later date. Severe depression, potentially depression after the birth of her last child, which was also undiagnosed, and that postpartum depression that existed in a severe situation. Just in culmination, I apologize for reading something to the board, but I've looked at so much material, and if I can beg the board's attention for a few minutes, I would like to say this and read this, because I think it summarizes everything that I've been talking about and everything that Susan wanted to talk about what happened. She said to me, and this was not in preparation for parole, I found this buried in a bunch of documents that had been provided to me, and it is from Susan. And she says, I believe this is what happened to me on October 25th, 1994. I lost touch with reality. My thoughts were not rational nor logic. I don't think I understood that if I allowed this car to go into the lake, that I would never see my children again. The finality of it was not real to me because my thoughts were so screwed up at the time. My mind, I thought, was doing what was best for them. I knew Jesus would take better care of them than I could. It was truly a moment of insanity. There are no easy explanations and not much understanding. How can you make sense of something that is senseless? And I think that shows the remorse that she's had. She's lived with this for forever since this thing. When I first met her and I would go and see her, remorse is difficult. You know, that's something with the parole hearings that I've presented for years, is to how do you demonstrate remorse? People do it in different manners. And I always look for that. I always ask my clients, and look for the remorse. I could see the pain on her face. It was so difficult. Talking about things were extremely difficult. And not because she didn't want to talk about them, it's just because it was so hard to talk about them. So I think that she is truly remorseful for what happened. And I think she would do anything in the world to bring these children back. But moving on to the next consideration in this presentation is really changes. What changes has she made in herself in prison? One of the things I think is important is that she has no prior history. Nothing that would lead up to believe that someone would be capable of a crime of this nature, which I think is also indicative of what their risk is if the board was inclined to allow her to participate on parole. I don't think that was as a risk, and I think that's what our counselor, who had seen her on a regular basis for a number of years, also indicated that it was very low risk. She's been IRC chairman within the institution. That means something. You're voted on by your peers, and it is an honor to be in that position. She has been a math tutor in education. She's helped numerous inmates obtain their GED. She's been in the character arts program, prison fellowship, which I think is extremely important to her. She's much stronger in her faith than she has ever been. And that is a comfort for her. It's something that she enjoys. It's something that is extremely important. Jumpstart, good program. She's been in that program. She would actually like to go to Jumpstart if the board would consider her for parole. He has been out of the program for a couple of years, and that would be, she'd have to do some other things for that to happen. So that's why we have chosen that she would go and live with her brother. Good, solid individual in the community, willing to help her in any manner. And one thing I've noticed from the family and friends is that we mourn with her the pain of this crime, but we still love her and we're there for her. So she has that for her, and which is a great resource if the board was going to consider her for parole. One of the other things I've noticed is giving back to the community, arts and crafts. She's made arts and crafts that she's donated to charity. She's helped St. Jude's. She's helped staff members. She said that an insight into what's going on with her, stand on her own 2 feet, not to be influenced by others, live a better life, think before acting. And, you know, other people are affected by your decisions and your actions, and the importance of mental health. I think that comes back into what we're talking about. It's not an excuse, but it is certainly some indication or maybe explanation as to what was going on. The goals, and this is my final area for my presentation, is that I don't think she'll ever be able to forgive herself. That is something that she struggles with forever. I don't think that creates a danger to anyone, except potentially maybe a danger to her. Her medications, her mental health medications, have been balanced well by the Department of Corrections. I think she thinks as clear now as she ever has. I think that she is able to establish goals and what she would like to do in her life. And I think on the top of that list is to give back and to try to help others. She said that no one should suffer in the way that in their treatment. There is help available, and she wants to help to get out and maybe help to promote that that concept that there's help out there. You just have to seek it. And she said she'd like to live a quiet life. She would welcome supervision if granted parole, and maybe that is the best thing about this situation. From that type of situation is that if she's granted parole, it is for life, and she will be supervised and she will be monitored by the Department of Probation and Parole Services for the rest of her life. She said that she would welcome that because that is another pillar of stability that is available for her that she can reach out to. And she said that that would be a vital and instrumental part of her life. She loves animals. She said that would like to find a job helping with dogs and cats. I often ask my clients, if you could choose and you could make these wishes come true, what would you like to do? You know, what is the job that you truly would enjoy? Often that's different than the job that we have. And I think that job for Susan is the care for animals and being involved in that area of help. In closing, I think that she has indicated to me that her desire is to make her life mean something, something other than the things that she has done, to make a positive impact in her life. I talked to somebody, I've spoken to a number of people, and I've spoken to one person that told me, they were at the trial, and they said that their impression of Susan was that she was living to die. I didn't really understand that. I think the more that I have been talking to her and preparing this case, that maybe I do. I think that has been Susan's life, is living to die for the things that she has done. And I think that what she's asking today is to ask the board to consider a parole for her, so maybe she can make something positive out of a horrific situation. I want to thank you for your time. I know I've taken a lot of time today. I would just ask if you would please consider her for release.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas, and we appreciate all
Yes,
your
ma'am.
comments.
Thank you.
And again, thank you for the very detailed packet that you presented. Ms. Smith,
Yes, ma'am.
what would you like to tell us today?
First of all, I want to say how very sorry I am.
It's okay, Susan. Just talk with us.
I know that what I did was horrible. And I would give anything if I could go back and change it. And I love Michael and Alice with all my heart.
Ms. Smith, were you under the influence of drugs or alcohol the night that you murdered your children?
No, ma'am, I was not.
Your attorney talked about working with mental health. Is that helpful to you?
Ma'am,
Mr. Thomas
I
talked,
hear you.
Mr. Thomas talked about the fact that you were working with mental health, and my question is that helpful to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that something that you would be willing to continue with on the outside if you were granted parole?
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Smith, your crime took a lot of resources from the law enforcement community. What, if anything, would you say to the folks who worked so hard to find your children if you had the opportunity to speak to them today?
That I'm sorry that I put them through that. I really, really am. And I'm especially sorry to the drivers that I had to find them. I wish I could take that back. I really do. I didn't lie to get away with it. I really didn't. I was just scared. I didn't know how I could tell the people that loved them that they would never see them again. I didn't know how I could tell David he couldn't see his sons again. And I'm sorry. I don't know. I know that's not enough. I know it's not, but I don't know. I know those just sound like words, but they come from my heart. They really do.
Right. One of the things that we review is your institutional record, and you've had some infractions throughout the years, some involving the use of some narcotics. Do you have any issues with drugs or alcohol at this point?
I don't. No, ma'am, I don't.
And you had a recent disciplinary infraction just a few months ago. So why should this board think that if we grant you parole that you're going to go out and follow the rules and the laws of society if you do not follow the rules within the institution?
Well, this last infraction, I was trusted the wrong person. This lady contacted me and I trusted her. I thought she was going to do a documentary on mental health, and I really am not guilty of what they charged me with, and I have filed an appeal on that charge. And as far as your question, I've never been in trouble before, and the things that I have been found guilty of in here have been just stupidity. I know I made a lot of mistakes in here, and I have learned from them. And before this last infraction had been 10 years, because I grew up and I knew that I needed to stop making dumb decisions, and I did. I knew it was time to grow up and do the right thing. I just made a lot of dumb choices and mistakes in here. So I know I've learned from those mistakes.
What do you feel is the most
And I'm not
important
gonna do
thing that
that.
you've learned while you've been incarcerated?
Ma'am,
What do you think is the most important thing that you have learned while you have been incarcerated?
that people are important, that forgiveness and love, that family is important, and that decisions we make not just affect us, they affect the people that we love. And not to take things or people for granted.
All right. Is there anything else that you would like to tell us today that wasn't in your packet or that has not already been said?
I would just like to say that I am a Christian, and God is a big part of my life, and I know He has forgiven me, and it is by His grace and mercy and I have a lot of faith, and I live by that every day. And I just ask that you show that same kind of mercy as well. And I guess, yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions
Okay, thank
from the
you.
board? Folks at Watkins, I need each of you to please state your name for the record and your relationship to Ms. Smith. Ma'am, can we begin with you, please?
Ma'am, state your name and your relationship.
What?
Ma'am, state your name and your relationship.
I did not, is it I?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Ann Curry, and I'm a long-term friend and supporter of Susan.
Thank you, Ms. Curry. And sir, your name, please?
And
State your name, sir, and your relationship. State your name and your relationship.
okay, I'm the Reverend Tom Curry. I've known Susan briefly when she was a teenager, when I was called in for one session each, counseling about two different matters, once by her teacher and once by Susan. And I testified at her trial, in the sentencing phase, and I have kept up with her by writing her
Thank you.
weekly for the last 30 years. I did this because I felt that she needed somebody to remind her that her whole life was not caught up in that one experience, but that she could put her life back together, because her life was in such turmoil when all this happened. And I think she's a different person now. And that's what I want to talk about when I get a chance to say a word about it. I have new hearing aids, and I can't always hear your questions, but my mind's fine, and I'm just a retired Presbyterian minister alone.
Well, thank you, Mr. Curry. We appreciate that, and you're welcome. You're welcome to make your statement that you would like to make right now.
All right. Okay, I want to start with her trial.
Mr. Curry, let me
Because
interrupt
at
you
that
before you
point-
get too far into that. We are not here to retry her case in any form or fashion. That is not the purpose of the parole board. We are here to determine if she is a good candidate for parole, and if so, we would set the parameters of that parole. But in no way can we discuss the trial or retry her case. She was convicted of 2 counts of murder. If you'd like to speak to anything outside of that, you're welcome to.
Okay, me now. I just want to say 2 things about the trial. I only went to the trial for one part of one morning to testify in the sentencing phase against the death penalty. And the 2 things that I picked up from the trial itself was, one, a prison guard who came, a female, who said that she had not seen a criminal as remorseful as Susan was, and that she felt her remorse for what she had done was genuine. And the second thing was one of the jurors. The prosecuting attorney was pushing hard for the death penalty, and the jury voted not, and they voted life, as y'all have already mentioned. But one of the jurors said that she felt like that it would be harder for Susan to live with what she had done than to die. And I thought that was a true statement. And it certainly has been for Susan during her 30 years in prison, and especially the first part of her time that she was there. It's been easy. She attempted suicide several times. And she had a couple of run-ins where guards were able to use her for their pleasure, and that's a bad situation, and was dealt with, and she was not the only prisoner involved.
All right, thank you, Mr. Curry. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your comments. Mrs. Curry, do you wish to say anything?
Yes, please, and thank you for letting us speak. I just want to say that I really think Susan is ready for parole now. She has surrounded herself with a caring support community that advises and encourages her, and she listens to them. As Mr. Thomas said, she has done everything she can to prepare herself to live outside of prison and taking courses and learning how to teach and caring about other people and working on teams and projects together. And thirdly, as both of them have said, she is not the young woman who went into prison 30 years ago. She is much stronger. She has grieved, is still grieving, will always grieve. But she's learned from it. And she has experienced paralyzing remorse and survived. Today, she wants to begin to rebuild her life, and I hope you'll give her that chance.
I want to say one more word. For the last 2 years, now remember I wrote her for 30 years, once a week, pretty close to every week. And that is the last 2 years I've ended my letters by saying, Susan, you live in a needy place. Share God's love with those around you and with your other contacts, but always live in hope for your own future. There is a time when you will live on your own again past prison. And that's what I hope y'all will give her the chance to do at this time. She is a very different person from what she was 30 years ago. And I've probably been in contact with her talking about spiritual things, but also just trying to enlarge her life by telling her about what's going on in the world around her and in the Curry family. She's the same age as one of my children.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Curry. We appreciate all of your comments, sir. We appreciate all of your comments and all of the information. Mr. Thomas, anything in closing, sir?
No, ma'am. Nothing further than I really would ask the board to take the time to consider Susan's request for parole. I do believe that if we look at insight into things that we've done and as far as things that we need to do to get out of the Department of Corrections and to try to make our life worthwhile or mean something, I think Susan is at that point. And I just again want to thank you for listening today, and hope you would consider our presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Thank you, Ms. Smith, and thank you,
Yes,
Mr. and
ma'am.
Mrs. Curry. We certainly appreciate all of you joining us today. If you all will please exit the rooms, we will have an answer for you later today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
One moment as the room clears. And the room is clear, and we do have additional testimony facilitated by the Office of Victim Services.
Please wait as all victims join from central office.
Good afternoon. You all come on in. Thank you. Can you move just a little further around so we can get everyone in? Thank you so much. Thank you. Good afternoon. You all are here for the parole consideration case of Susan Smith. Is that correct?
Yes.
We are so very, very sorry for the circumstances that brought you all to be a part of this hearing today. but we cannot tell you how much we appreciate you joining us and being here with us today. Thank you so much. Before we begin, I do need each of you to please state your name for the record and your interest in this case. Sir, can we begin with you, please?
Stand up.
You don't have to stand up. You do whatever's comfortable for you.
I'm David Smith. I'm the father of Michael and Alex.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
I'm Tiffany Smith. I am David Smith's wife.
I'm Rebecca Smith French. I'm the aunt of Michael and Alex.
I'm Savannah Smith, and I am David's daughter, Michael and Alex's sister.
Austin Hughes. I'm a friend of the victim family.
I'm Tommy Pope. I was the solicitor in the original trial.
I'm Kevin Brackett. I'm the 16th Circuit solicitor currently and was a prosecutor on the original case.
Laura Hudson with the Crime Victims Council.
Mark Reynolds. I'm with the victim's family.
Billy Bailey, personal friend.
Kathy Bailey, personal friend.
Jeff Bailey, Sheriff, Union County.
Scott Cofer, Sheriff's Office, Union County.
Michael Cogdill, documentarian.
Rita Swan, aunt to Michael and Alex.
Doug Smith, Dave's uncle.
Thank you all, and again, we are so very, very sorry for the circumstances, but thank you for being here with us today. We do have the facts of the events, and we've heard from Ms. Smith. Now we want to hear from you all, whether you were for or against parole, and if anyone would like to make a statement, you are certainly welcome to do so. Mr. Smith, would you like to begin, or would you like to conclude at the end? It's completely up to you.
Conclude at the end, please.
Okay. Who would like to speak first?
I'll speak first, please, ma'am.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So I'm Tommy Pope. I was the 16th Circuit solicitor, and this was a death penalty case. And the reason it was a death penalty case, you know, the solicitor has that discretion, but the reason it was a death penalty case, you know the facts and circumstances, and I just felt strongly that had the black man with the toboggan committed the crime, people would expect a death penalty. If David Smith had committed the crime, people would expected the death penalty. And I thought it was very important that the betrayal that Susan Smith showed, that she be treated the same. We knew it was going to be difficult. We knew there was a likelihood of not achieving the death penalty. But I think it's important to note the jury at the time actually asked, what did life mean? And you may be aware, but in that time, life did not mean life. Life became life in '96. We tried the case in '95. So the jury was asked, and the judge was required to instruct the jury that you take life and death in its plain and usual meaning. Carrying that forward, the jury showed her mercy. The jury gave her a life sentence. But one of the jurors, or more of the jurors, after the fact, and speaking to the media, said that they believed the life sentence was the greater punishment because they believed that Susan should have to reflect on what she did to Michael and Alex, that she should have to spend the rest of her life thinking about what she'd done. The two fallacies in that logic that the jury could not have known are, number one, obviously we're here today, so life did not mean life. Number two, and you have it before you, Susan's conduct from the day she rolled the kids in the lake. The defense claimed a botched suicide, but she was able to save herself. She was able to blame a black guy. She wasn't wet. She wasn't injured when she runs to the house and concocts this story. Susan has always focused on Susan. I will believe to the end of my time that Susan made a horrible, horrible choice to choose a man over her family. I said the boys were in the car, her wedding gown was in the car, her wedding album was in the car. She thought in a nice package she could roll that away. If she could have put David in the car, he would have been there too. In a nice package, she could roll that away and start this new life with this other man. And she led everyone on, including David, for 9 horrible days. And so as you look at her conduct in prison, whether it was a relationship with guards, the social media, the attention, the conduct recently with the publisher, Susan, you know, she's got people outside, I'm sure you've heard from them, that want to take care of her. Susan has always focused on what's best for Susan. And so the evidence that you have before you, I think, tells clearly that she has not focused on Michael and Alex. She only has and continues to focus on herself. And so on behalf of this family, on behalf of justice and the justice for this case, it's not about her behavior or what she would do when getting out, but I know one of your criteria is the nature of the crime and whether the punishment is there. And I would submit for the crime she committed, the action she committed, that punishment has not been achieved yet. And so I would ask you to deny parole. Now, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Solicitor Pope. We appreciate it. Would anyone else like to speak?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
Madam Chairman, Chair Lady, and members of the board, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. I was on the prosecution team that handled the prosecution along with Solicitor Pope and Speaker Pope now, who you just heard from. I wanted to bring to you a couple of vignettes from the case to help bring this alive for you. In the course of preparing for today, I've gone back over the case. I've reviewed the file. I've pulled some of the evidence out, which is in a closet just off my office. Evidence like the note that was written to Susan Smith by her boyfriend, the man she was cheating on her husband with, who told her in the note that he could not be with her anymore because he didn't want children, and that they had no long-term future because he didn't want children. And then 1 week later, she's rolling her car down the ramp at John D. Long Lake with her 2 children strapped into the back. She betrayed her husband when she cheated on him, and she betrayed her children against the laws of nature when she should have been sworn to protect those children. She betrayed them when she left them in the seat and rolled that car down, and she was not trying to commit suicide. She was trying to change her life. She wanted to kill her old life and start anew. She was wearing a sweatshirt that the man who she was cheating with had given to her when she was on TV 2 hours later after claiming that a black man in a toboggan had carjacked her and spirited her 2 children away. How many black men in red Mazdas got pulled over across the country because they were looking for those 2 kids and they were looking for this fictitious man that didn't exist, purely a figment of her imagination? I was on the banks of John D. Long Lake, standing there with about 40 or 45 people, 50 people, as the tow truck from Greer's Wrecker launched its line into the water where divers hooked it up to the car and pulled it out. Total silence as that car emerged from the dark water. Everybody sitting there hoping and praying that maybe it was a different car. Maybe it was a wrong car. Maybe the kids weren't in there. Not a word was said. It was one of the most haunting memories of my life, and it will live with me forever. And that's the last point I want to make. You're going to hear from this man, and he's going to tell you what this did to him. I can't begin to describe it. I sat in court and listened to him testify, and it was heart-wrenching as he described that his hopes and dreams for the future were destroyed that night when she killed their 2 children. This didn't just traumatize him. It traumatized Union. It traumatized South Carolina. The entire country was in the grips of her lie and her treachery. The entire country. This was a global sensation. People were fixated on this. They're not the only victims. And on behalf of the community that I represent now, I don't believe she should ever be released from jail until the last person alive who remembers Michael and Alex is dead. And that will not be in her lifetime. She should never be released, and she should not be released now. His hopes and dreams were dashed. I hope you dash hers today and every 2 years hereafter.
Thank you, Solicitor. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Okay.
You're welcome to stay seated if you're more comfortable, whatever's best for you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to read what I wrote. Okay, it's easier, if you don't mind. When Susan murdered Michael and Alex, she altered the course of my life and my family's life forever. Having grown up with 3 older brothers, Susan was like the sister I never had. I was a teenage mom of just 16, so I looked up to her and even admired her. I thought she was the best mother to the boys, and I strived to be just like her. I would even leave my own daughter with her while I attended night school. Susan betrayed us and took the lives of those boys and then lied about it. For days, when she did this, she destroyed a trust in me that I've never regained. And as a result, I do not develop close relationships with others easily, in particular females. Anxiety and depression have plagued my life for years. I push it away during spring and summer as best possible, but it always creeps back up around Alex's birthday when it rolls around in August, because I know Michael's won't be far behind in October, and then the anniversary of their death on the 25th. Because in my mind, I always refer to this period of time as the sad months. Throughout my career, the majority of any time missed at work is around Michael and Alex's birthdays and the anniversary of their death. I stay in bed and sleep to deal with the depression. It's just easier this way, or at least it seems to be. Something as simple as taking up a new hobby turned into a nightmare for me last year. My boyfriend and I decided to take scuba diving lessons. I geared up with all the equipment, face mask on, oxygen tank on my back, stepped off the side of the pool into 15 feet of water and immediately sank to the bottom from all the weight I was carrying. Normally you'd remember to breathe and begin to ascend as I had studied for all the weeks leading up to that point, but nothing prepared me for dropping into a body of water and the feeling of being weighted down, unable to breathe, and seeing Michael and Alex's face. I immediately panicked, ripping off my face mask, sucking in water, and not being able to come to the surface from all the weight I was carrying. I was drowning, and I knew in that moment that was the closest I'd ever come to knowing what my nephews had endured and how horrific and scared their last moments had to have been. Something as simple as taking up a new hobby was yet one more thing Susan was taken from me. In over 25 years, I have found myself finding comfort going to the cemetery where the boys are buried, beside our older brother. I go there often and I will tidy up their graves, where people have left trinkets or gifts, and I talk to them. I go there when I'm happy, I go there when I'm upset. Rainy days, sunny days, cold days and hot days, it doesn't matter. It brings me peace just being there. But as a result, I'm not able to bring myself to move away from Union County, because now I don't want to leave them. We have missed Michael and Alex's kindergarten graduations, numerous birthdays, birthday parties, summer vacations, Easters, along with annual Easter egg hunts at Meemaw's, Thanksgivings, Christmases, football, soccer, baseball games, proms, high school graduations, possible marriages, and births of their own children. We don't know, because they never had a chance. They never had a chance to live a life of their own. Susan took that from them. She took that from us all. And now she wants a chance to be free after only serving 30 years. No. Life should mean life. So I'm respectfully asking you to please deny her request for parole. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
I apologize if I get a little bit emotional. I drove down from Detroit on Monday night, which was Halloween before of that week. And a young man, middle-aged man then, I'm an old man now, but the boys never got to. As Becky said, they missed a lot. They missed their life. Today they would be in their 30s. David would probably be a granddad. The boys were still here. I took my sister out to the lake yesterday, and it's a beautiful drive out there. I was just thinking, all that time she had time to change her mind, to stop and turn around and not go through with it, but she did. and then the boys were gone. A year later, I came back down for the trial. Tommy Pope did a good job. They proved that she was guilty. During the sentencing trial, they came back and recommended life. Tommy had argued for the death penalty. The family was for death penalty. They come back and recommended life. But we said, well, we'll live with it. You know, she'll have to live with it every day for the rest of her life. So we were satisfied with life, but we do not want a parole. We were against any parole for her. And then two other items going back 30 years. The Friday morning after apologize. But the Friday morning after, David, his dad, my brother's wife, and I, the four of us, were sitting at Holcomb Funeral Home in Union and discussing the funeral arrangements. David asked to see the boys, and Mr. Holcomb had a funny look on his face, and he said, "Mr. Smith, could I see you?" So we went out, and he said, "You know, your nephew can't see the boys." And he told me why. He said, "You know, the boys were in the water for 9 days." So I went back and told David, I said, "You know, it's better that you don't see the boys." And I think deep down he understood why. The next day, Saturday, three of us, David, his dad, and I went out to the Bougainville United Methodist Church Cemetery and to look where the boys are going to be buried. And David's brother, Danny, who had died 3 years earlier, was buried there. David wanted his boys buried next to his brother, their uncle. But the way the cemetery was laid out, there was no room for the boys to be put next to Danny. So I found the cemetery custodian and asked him if it were possible to move Danny. And he said, "Well, yes, if that's what the family wants, we can move Danny." So I went back and told my brother. I said, "You know, David wants the boys to be next to their uncle. Would you have a problem if we moved Danny?" And he said no. So if you go out to the cemetery, you'll find that Danny and the boys are side by side.
Does anyone else wish to speak?
Yes, I'll go, please.
Yes, ma'am.
So as David's wife, I have stood by him for the last 30 years and watched his pain, his suffering, his dark days that you cannot imagine. It's been hard as a loving wife to stand back and watch him suffer the pain that he has gone through. To not want to get out of bed some days. To not be able to get out of bed. Because the pain was so much for him. And for 30 years we have thought this day would never come. But yet here we are. I don't feel that that it's time for her to be let out because she took 2 lives. She didn't just take 1. She took 2 precious little boys that we haven't been able to watch grow up. And as Becky stated earlier, all the things that we've missed out on because of them not being here, all the things they missed out on growing up in and doing. And for her to be in prison for the last 30 years, you would think that she would have thought about what she's done. She would have said, I'm sorry. But she hasn't said, I'm sorry. She hasn't even called him. She hasn't even told him she was sorry. Much less the world. For 9 days, all I can think about is how much she lied and manipulated everybody. The whole world. I watched it and believed her myself. I wanted her to be telling the truth. But to be betrayed by her lies. And that just makes me feel like if she could do that then, whatever she's told you today, I'm sure were probably lies as well. Because she has shown in her last 30 years what she does in prison. She's all about herself. It's all about what she can do to make her life better. Michael and Alice didn't get a chance at life. They were forced the death penalty. She took that from them. The lives of this family has been forever changed. It caused us to be a little overprotective of our now daughter. A little bit more than we probably should have been. Because we were afraid something might happen to her. It's changed the way we look at life. It's changed the way that we look at everybody. Who can I trust? For a long time, I didn't trust a lot of people. I had to be careful, around certain people. I didn't know if I could trust them or not. All because of her lies. So to help give this family some peace, it would be best if Susan stayed behind bars and stay in prison for the rest of her life. I respectfully ask you to keep her in. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anyone else wish to speak for Mr. Smith? Sheriff, anyone? Yes, ma'am.
Forgive me. Most of what I have to say is going to be pretty redundant. But primarily I would just like to focus on, since I came after the fact, what I had stolen from me was 2 older brothers, the good and the bad of having older siblings. And I now try to use my life as a way to live for them. And growing up, I didn't quite understand it my whole life, but when I finally did, I felt like I had witnessed it, like I was there. The pain that not only was caused to me in like a domino effect, but what I have seen firsthand with my father, my aunt, and our whole hometown. We can no longer say that we're from Union County without Susan's actions being brought up. And just for the sake of all of us and our whole community, I ask that you deny her request.
Mr. Smith, you're welcome to stay seated if you are uncomfortable.
Madam Chairman, members of the committee. It's been a tough 30 years. I'm not here to speak about what she's done in prison. You all have the records and accounts of all that. I'm just here to advocate on Michael and Alex's behalf and as their father. You know, God gives us free choice. And she made free choice that night to end her life. This wasn't a tragic mistake. It wasn't something that she didn't mean to do. She purposely meant to end her life. I never have felt any remorse from her for it. She's never expressed any to me. I've never seen it on paper. No, as you've heard, she changed my life for the rest of my life that night. Some for the better, some for the worse, but what she did, not only to Michael and Alex, she came pretty close to causing me to end my life because of the grief that she brought upon me. But thankfully she didn't. I understand back in 95 that through the state's law, life in prison meant 30 years to life. And now that's different, but at that time, that's what counts. I understand that. But ultimately, to me, that's only 15 years per child. Her own children. It's just not enough. So I'm asking that you please deny her parole today. And hopefully in the future, but specifically today. Not let her out. I miss them very much. And I love them very much. And I will be here every 2 years going forward to ensure that your death doesn't go in vain. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Smith. Again, please know how very, very sorry this board is to all of you for all the pain that this crime caused you. But we sincerely appreciate you all being here with us today. Thank you very much. And thank you for the reminder with the picture of Alex and Michael. They were beautiful children. So thank you for reminding us of that today. We wish you the very best. And if no one else has anything else that they would like to say, if you all will exit with these ladies over here, we'll have an answer for you shortly. Thank you so much for being here. As a reminder, Mrs. Mira did recuse herself. Ms. Susan Smith is denied parole. The vote is unanimous. Numbers 1 and 6. Thank you.
Thank you. The time now is 12:51 p.m. We will pause our recording. Ms. Hunter, if you can advise when the recording has been paused.
You have been tuning into our continuing coverage of the parole hearing for Susan Smith, a Union, South Carolina woman convicted of murdering her 2 sons in 1994 by driving them into John D. Long Lake.
Yeah, we have Carol Clark here with us to cover the story as it unfolded. John Reckenbile, an attorney as well. John, I just want to get straight to you with your thoughts on this.
It's very, very expected to see that there was a full denial of this. I think it was well done by both sides, but you just can't take away the emotion of the situation. And I believe that the board did exactly what the regulations and the statutes call for.
Speaking of emotion, I guess that's the test of time here. It happened in 1994. Carol, you covered this in 94. Do you remember why this case grabbed so much attention, and why does it still have everyone's attention now?
Well, Destiny, remember, this was before the age of social media, when things were online. This was a situation, a case that was, you know, in newspapers, on radio, and on television. And at first, on October 25th, when the word was that this was a kidnapping, the family supplied so many videos and pictures of the boys. We had birthday parties. We had the big brother taking care of the little brother. Somebody mentioned during all of this that these were America's children, and that's how people felt. So when we found out what actually happened to the boys, I remember Tommy Pope in an interview saying there were grown men standing on the banks of John D. Long Lake sobbing. They felt so connected to these children because they had seen them day after day for 9 days, and people had been out searching for them. Scores of people were out searching in Union County for these boys, and they felt connected to this family, and they felt connected to the boys.
Yeah, you're looking at some of those pictures right now from 1994 and 1995. John, I want to talk about how the parole process works, but before we do that, you know, we heard from Susan Smith for the first time in 30 years, and the first thing out of the gate, she had this to say about appearing virtually and about the case.
First of all, I want to say how very sorry I am.
It's okay, Susan. Just talk with us.
I know that what I did was horrible. And I would give anything if I could go back and change it. And I love Michael and Alice with all my heart.
And John, obviously, you know, heinous crime here. She was convicted of murdering her 2 boys, but the parole board can't think of it just in that manner. The Supreme Court case ruled against that. They have to consider 16 different things, right?
Yes, that's correct. Absolutely. In 2008, we've said very clear from the state Supreme Court that you just can't just go to the heinousness of the crime, that the person's an evil individual based upon what they did back in the time of the commission of the crime. So there is a playbook that's literally set out that you have to go through each one of these prong elements, and that's literally what they were doing on both sides. And definitely with that, with Ms. Smith, one of the key elements is that the board wants to see remorse. Obviously, this might be the first time we've ever seen somewhat of an apology, and that's one of the factors that goes into consideration of whether or not to grant parole.
Yeah, so Carol, I was asking you all earlier, because you were on the ground for those 9 days, that there are crews out there, endless resources, as they stated in the press conference, searching for these 2 little boys. At one point, as the prosecutors mentioned this afternoon, throughout the nation, red Mazdas were stopped and searched for black men. What was that climate like in reporting during that time in 94?
That aspect of the case seemed to be more talked about outside of this area. In this area, I think from the very beginning there was skepticism about her account. And if you look at the artist rendering that was created, it's a side view of the person that she said took the boys. Who carjacks somebody and turns away from them while they're doing it? Yeah. There seemed to be some kind of skepticism about it, and it wasn't that much in play here. I mean, obviously the search was on for the boys, but it seemed that there was skepticism about her story from the very beginning.
Speaking of her story, I know that we have some more sound from her speaking earlier this afternoon. We do want to get to that.
That I'm sorry that I put them through that. I really, really am. And I'm especially sorry to the drivers that I had to find them. I wish I could take that back. I really do.
And people, Carol, remember this case really well. I mean, this is stuck in a lot of people's minds. And I just want to walk through for people that may be new to South Carolina or perhaps don't remember every aspect of the case. I mean, you were there in Union covering this. It started out as, according to Susan Smith, a kidnapping. Then there was the FBI polygraph where there were some inconsistencies. Then she admitted to it on November 3rd. I mean, what was that process like of going through each moment in that coverage and then getting to that?
Well, during the coverage, a lot of us were unaware that these things were going on in the background. But what I can tell you is those 9 days were just pure hell, you know, for the people of Union. The whole attention of the world, it wasn't just the United States, this became a global story, was on the small town of Union. And I remember Halloween fell during those 9 days. And I remember we were down there covering it on Main Street, and I think the parents of Union decided we're going to try to make life as normal as we can for our kids, so they took them trick-or-treating. But every parent that I saw had a tight grip on their child's hand. And you know, you're used to seeing kids run ahead to the door and yell trick-or-treat. They walked their kids up to the door. So they tried to make life as normal as they could for the kids, but still just clinging to them, you know, because they still thought this was, boys were gone, they didn't know what had happened to them. And it's something that they never thought would happen in Union.
Susan Smith's attorney earlier this afternoon had argued that this is still a mental health case when pertaining to Susan Smith. You had a lot to say about that.
Absolutely. I think really that was their only real theory of the case, to be able to say that this was more of a psychological matter and mental health, that she had, you know, all these factors going on during the commission of the crime, and really glossed over. And I think that's exactly what I would do in that situation. You always try to gloss over the worst stuff of your case. And so he was probably echoing some of the documentation that we won't have privy to in the public. Is a psychological report that is submitted to the parole board that they would have had preceding this. And so I think that's a lot what he was trying to do, is make sure that they could, all right, don't look over here, but let's focus here on the mental health aspect of it, and possibly the progress that she was making during the time that she has seen this mental health counselor during her confinement.
Yeah, we received, or we heard that there were several letters that were sent to the parole board to, I believe, for her parole, and then hundreds against. I mean, I know you covered that as well.
People still remember this case. At last count, I checked last week on the 11th, 321 letters were sent to the parole board. Now, a usual parole case, and John, you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe 10, maybe 20 letters, if that.
If that.
So 321 letters were sent, 319 were opposed to her getting parole. People have not forgotten what happened to Alex and Michael. And you can see with the family, of course, but I would be willing to say that many people in Union who were there at the time will never forget this case, never.
Well, David Smith and his family are now going to be speaking at a press conference right outside of the courthouse. Let's go ahead and toss it to that.
But he appreciates you being here today and supporting the family. Obviously, it's a positive decision today, but David wants to say a few words to you. Thank you.
You know, today has been 30 years coming. shocked and wasn't sure how to feel, what to expect. I know what I was hoping. I think, Susan, in the last 30 years, through her action, has continued to proven that it's all about her. What all this has done to her, how it has affected her. I haven't seen any remorse from her. So for her to think that I would even speak on her behalf, I do not understand that. But it's been such a tough 30 years for my family, for friends, loved ones, near and far. But today, the committee made the right decision and denied her parole, at least for another 2 years. So I'm not looking forward to it in 2 more years to go through this again, but at least I know for now she'll still be behind bars. And for 2 more years, there'll still be justice for Michael and Alex. Thank you.
We've got Kevin Brackett, who was my deputy solicitor at the time. Kevin is now the solicitor in York and Union counties. He tried the case with me. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer. Yes, sir.
Are you surprised by the result?
Personally, now I've got to speak for me. David and his family, he could speak for himself, but we were cautiously optimistic. I think, as David said, she's demonstrated that it's always been about Susan from the day she committed the crime. And so I think we're hopeful, we're happy. It's unfortunate that the law wasn't what it is now, that life meant life, because as we spent the last 3 hours together kind of reminiscing as a family, and we'll all be back 2 years from now, or as Solicitor Brackett said, as long as somebody's remembering Michael and Alex, we'll all be back here.
She mentioned living with her brother if she gets out. Do you want to see her back in the community?
From the folks I've spoken to in the Union community, they are ready to quit being the place where Susan Smith killed her children. I think the family members have said it's robbed them of their community and the love of their community. Absolutely, the best thing would be if Susan was ever paroled is that she would just disappear and go be anonymous somewhere. But unfortunately, we know based on her behavior that that's not going to happen.
No, I think, as I told the parole board, she traumatized not just the family, but she traumatized that entire community and left a scar on Union that will exist as long as people remember what she did, which is going to be for a long time. So I don't think anybody would be excited to see her return.
Yes, sir.
After having to seek the death penalty, or after seeking the death penalty and this ending up the way it did, what will it mean to have to do this every 2 years?
It is a torture for this family. It was a reunion of sorts. I've shared with you before that I don't contact these folks because we represent a bad time in their lives. But when I see them, I'll start crying now talking about it. The sad thing is that every 2 years, as David said, the clock starts ticking. 30 years seems like it went like this, but the flip side is that this is a strong family. David has put it from the beginning that it's about Michael and Alex. And as long as I can draw breath and be here to support them, and I know the family feels the same, we'll be here.
I'm not sure if you saw the
Yes, ma'am.
statement. I'm not sure if you saw the statement that Susan Smith delivered earlier today. She was tearful. She appeared remorseful. But do you think she's the same woman that she was 30 years ago?
I believe Susan is the same woman she was 30 years ago when she laughed in the courtroom when the jury wasn't in and cried as soon as the jury came in. And I got no reason to believe anything different. We weren't able to see the feed that you guys saw, so I don't know if you saw Kevin and I were discussing all the way from the day she called David Smith and he came out to the house, and he's on television, looks like a man who just told he lost his children, and Susan's excited about being on television. So I believe her to be the same solicitor. You may want
Yes,
to weigh
sir,
in.
I completely agree. You look at her record in jail and ask yourself, does this appear to be a woman who's changed her behavior, changed her life? If she were released, she would capitalize on this. She would attempt to monetize her fame. She does not need to be out of jail. She needs to stay in jail. These boys had 140 to 150 years of life ahead of them. She should stay there at least that long.
I'm the Reverend, and we want to say we appreciate y'all hard work y'all done, because the black family and a lot of young black men was being attacked, because of what she said, and you went down and got the truth. And as a minister and for other ministers, I come to tell y'all thank y'all for what y'all done.
Reverend,
David, we'll pray for you and your family too.
Reverend, I want to tell you I appreciate it. I've been asked over the years about the racial aspect of it. And I'll tell you, that community, they think because we're Southern, because we sound like me, that there's going to be an issue. That community handled that issue. A reporter asked an African-American lady in Union, what do you think about the community blaming a black man? And she said the community didn't blame a black man. Susan Smith blamed the black man. So I appreciate your words here, and I know the family does.
I told them, when the police come, put your hands up and just say, I ain't done nothing, mister. I ain't got no gun, I ain't got no children. And the police were very respectful. They came and searched the house, they pulled the guys over, they were in the red Mazda, and they checked out and they wasn't there, and they treated people fair. We thank you, because you went down and got the truth out.
Well, I made a point of telling the parole board that those people, how many black men who happen to resemble the man she imagined driving a red Mazda in California or Colorado or Missouri, how many of those people got pulled over because of what she did? They're all victims too.
So you said if it had been a black man who had been arrested and charged, he would have gotten the death penalty. If it had been David Smith, he wouldn't have gotten the death penalty. What made it different for Susan?
I think the difference for Susan Smith was a combination, and only really the jurors can answer that. I think the fact the trial was in Union, and you're going to see the same people at the grocery store every day, I think that made a difference. I think it makes us uncomfortable. It's actually a lot easier to blame the criminal or blame the father. We leave our kids at home every day with our mothers, and we don't think about it, and so I think it was unsettling, and they wanted to think there was some reason. It's hard for us to grasp that Susan's sole reason was selfishness and what was best for Susan.
And it's precisely that betrayal, because people expect their mothers to protect their children and lay down their very lives for them. And it's precisely that betrayal that makes this case so disturbing and such a terrible crime.
How does the community move forward now after today's showing, and knowing you still got time ahead? How do you move forward?
I think the difficulty is for these folks moving forward. I think Union, just like I'll always be the Susan Smith prosecutor, Union will always be the place where Susan Smith took Michael and Alex's life. I think where your prayers need to be, Reverend, is praying, as you said, for this family and for God's peace on them, because they're going to be dealing with it long after we go back home. Hug your kids tonight. Remember the positive things, and remember how hard this family fought and what they've been through and how they stood strong for Michael and Alex. Thank you, guys. Yes, sir.
Bernie brought up her past as part of her dad committed suicide.
Yes.
How much do you think that played a role in the court today? Do you think he thought about that enough?
I think the defense presented that, all the way back in death penalty, and I think that may have helped in mitigation. She went from Susan the monster at the time of the crime to Susan the victim when we're trying it in July. But the truth is, if you peel back the facts, as horrible as that is, she made choices. It's like David said today. She chose. If it had been a botched suicide, she could have shown up at that house wet. She could have shown up at that house injured. She could have come and said, I made a horrible mistake. She didn't. It was all about what's best for Susan. And so those are sad, tragic circumstances, may have made the woman she is, but the woman she is made a horrible decision and took two precious lives. Ready, guys? Good. Thank you for your time today. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, David.
And if you're just joining us, Susan Smith, the woman who was convicted of murdering her 2 boys in 1994, was denied bond just moments ago. John, I want to get back to that, parole moments ago. I want to get back to that parole process. But before I do that, we heard from David Smith just now in the press conference. We heard from him in the parole hearing as well. Here's one of the things he had to say during that parole hearing.
I miss them very much. And I love them very much. And I will be here every 2 years going forward to ensure that your death doesn't go in vain.
You heard David Smith say that. You heard several people that talked at the parole hearing say 2 years, 2 years, 2 years. Why is that? It's every 2 years that the parole board meets again to determine her parole status?
South Carolina law sets up the fact that if you are a violent criminal, which is just a statutorial category, that you get a parole hearing every 2 years. It's mandatory. So we're going to have to be reliving this every 2 years, and it's going to be the same process unless she waives it. She has every right to say, well, I don't think I'm fit back out to society, and she has the ability to waive it and not go through a hearing like this.
Our Carol Clark, she was covering this from the very beginning in 1994 as part of the union there. This was lengthy. 9 days probably felt like a very, very long time if you were in the thick of it. What do you remember about the night that Susan was charged?
Well, let's take a look back at that moment because there was so much interest in this case. I remember the night that the announcement was made that she had been arrested, the parking lot outside the sheriff's office was packed with people. And we have then Union County Sheriff Howard Wells announcing the arrest of Susan Smith. Let's take a listen.
Susan Smith has been arrested and will be charged with 2 counts of murder in connection with the deaths of her children, Michael 3 and Alexander 14 months.
I don't know if you heard it, but there was such a gasp that went through the crowd. People were sobbing in the parking lot. We were crying in the studio. We had become so invested in this story, in the story of these 2 precious little boys who we thought might have been kidnapped. Something happened. A lot of people told me after the arrest that they always suspected her. I thought perhaps it was a custody case that had gone wrong and it had gotten all this attention and all of a sudden she didn't know what to do with it. But the fact that she actually put those boys into their car seat, put the car in neutral, let it roll into John D. Long Lake and take 6 long minutes to sink, it just devastated people. And it still does.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it, and it's on the screen right now if you're just joining us. I mean, this is the last photo taken of Michael Smith. We've seen videos of Michael and Alexander Smith. I mean, you said this, you were invested in the kids. I mean, it was
sure.
days.
And we learned so much about them. Little Michael at 3 years old had a left foot that turned in, so he had to wear a brace every night in bed. And David talked about how he could hear him, thumping those legs because, he had that brace and he didn't like it. And he was also such a great big brother. He always looked out after Alex. Alex was a roly-poly, happy baby. And Michael was, a little concerned about his safety, so he'd follow him around and make sure he was okay. We got to know these boys. And then to have this happen, it was a nightmare for a lot of people.
Including David, the father, who we just heard from, and he had the full support of an aunt, an uncle, of his wife, his now daughter, and friends and family. Was that surprising to see? And the prosecution that was up there, they hit the ground running with their statements.
And even the parole board, the comments from the Madam Chair Lady, which is not out of bounds because everybody feels the emotion of this. You can't if you're human. But the prosecutors did a artful job in laying out exactly the feelings of their office and just kind of dovetailing into the victims, because most South Carolina cases, when you're dealing with this, are all going to hinge upon the victim statements. Let's just, when it comes down to it, that's the final prong in the analysis of what they go through the board, is really how do the victims feel and how will this affect the community. And really, at the end of the day, you just can't dismiss that. You just can't divorce that from yourself when you're seeing this.
John,
today.
the parole rate is actually quite low, isn't it? Because we did have a case, we've been listening to cases all morning here, waiting for Susan Smith to show up. But there was a case where the victim said, yes, I think this person should be let out for parole, an earlier case. And that was denied. And I think the approval rate for parole by the board is 8%.
And I would wonder if that is just violent or nonviolent, or just the one category of nonviolent, because I really think that violent criminals, their parole rate is probably really low. Because that case that you're speaking of, it was actually the son of the victim, and his uncle was the defendant that committed the crime.
Sure.
And he was saying, please let my uncle out, even though he killed his father. So I think that the parole rate, and that was the only one that we saw one vote for it, but you need 2/3 majority to have parole granted.
We do want to get to our Jane Robelo and Stephanie Trotter now. They are in Colombia right now with the latest with what's happening down there. Jane and Stephanie, what can you tell us about what's happening in Colombia?
Well, it was a really intense place down here, I think, and Stephanie told me earlier today that this sort of was reminiscent of what you saw in Union 30 years ago. But the intensity of what happened in that parole hearing was great. And then right out here in the news conference, both Tommy Pope and Kevin Brackett, the 16th circuit solicitor at the time of the conviction of Susan Smith, and the current solicitor who was on that case at the time, both said this has always only ever been about Susan. It's always been about her. Don't listen to the things that she says about her mental health issues. That's probably true, but it's always been about her. And honestly, Stephanie and I talked ahead of time, and they both said a great deal of what you expected them to say.
They did. We spoke with them last week, and I'm going to take this out of my ear real quick so that I can hear better. There we go. When we spoke with them last week, they kept pressing that they were going to stress they want justice for Alex and Michael. And when the decision went to the jury denied the death penalty, and they said they wanted her to serve life, and that they thought life really meant life, not 30 years of a life sentence. We heard that today during the hearing. We heard that today again outside here. David told me last week he didn't realize life didn't mean life until a couple of weeks after the trial. Imagine that in his grief, as still as the shock that he continues to process now some 30 years later. That life did not mean life, and they told me it's the simple things. What would they do if Susan does get out, she's in the free world, and they bump into her at Walmart? And I found it interesting that today her representative before the board said that she would possibly go back and live with her brother. Right. And we've heard again and again that it isn't just David Smith and the boys that are victims, it was the entire Union community. And Kevin Brackett even went as far as to say all of South Carolina and America that was victimized by the 9 days of her lies. And so I found that interesting. They don't want Susan Smith back in the community where people can run into her and she would have to face the very people that she lied to again and again.
And in going for the death penalty, Tommy Pope at the time said, if it had actually been an African-American man, as Susan Smith claimed, who had carjacked her children, he would be getting the death sentence. If it had been David Smith, he probably would have gotten the death sentence. She did accuse, out of nowhere, she said that it was a black man somewhere in his 20s to 30s, even draw a composite sketch. And today, the Reverend Raymond Johnson, who is now in Marion, South Carolina, but at the time was a Baptist preacher right behind us here, was a Baptist preacher in Charlotte. He said he was called down to Union County at the time because the black community was so afraid, and he was able to talk to them and keep them calm, but at the same time he did credit the community in Union, saying that someone said to him, you ask a black member of the congregation there, are you upset with the community of Union for blaming African Americans? And the woman told him it was not the community that blamed African Americans, but it was Susan Smith who blamed African Americans. Yet he felt it very important today, Stephanie, to come here to say thank you to the parole board for keeping Susan Smith in jail, and also just to remind people of how egregious that crime was with that insinuation that it was an African-American person. Kevin Brackett even saying in the hearing to the parole board, African-American men and women were stopped in their cars. Anybody driving a red Mazda matching the description of Susan Smith's car was pulled over all over the United States of America. So I feel like in almost having 30 years to look back at this, 30 years to let the grievances come up to the surface again. Maybe there was some healing today. You were there 30 years ago. You can address that better.
I was. And again, at the time, they felt it was Susan Smith. It wasn't the community. And you have to remember, at that point in time, Union County was 33,000 people from top to bottom. They knew everybody. They knew one another. They knew you're not capable of this. But as Tommy Pope pointed out today, you also don't think a mother is capable of this, and yet she was.
And that's the very thing that he said makes it hard for people to sleep at night. Now, Susan Smith's attorney, Tommy Thomas, did appear virtually, as she did from prison today, and he made a case that the parole board is eager to hear. How will the parolee do well? Where will they live? What kind of job will they have? What are the conditions of parole? And he did a very good job, I think, about addressing her mental health issues and then telling the parole board how she has addressed those mental health issues, what she has learned while in prison. She also making a very impassioned plea that she has changed in the last 10 years, that she was a victim of the guards, that it was not consensual sex, and yet it did not seem to sway the parole board.
What I found an interesting contrast here is that a lot of the mental health things that her representative talked about today were the exact same mental health issues that were brought up during the penalty phase of the trial. There wasn't anything new that necessarily came up. What I found interesting is since the day that she confessed, all through the trial a year later and the penalty phase especially, Tommy Pope, the Smiths, and the family that was so betrayed, they have said time and again she is a narcissist. You will hear that term time and again. And all along going into today, that Tommy Pope, David Smith, had said Susan has always made it all about Susan. I found it ironic when her representative got up there and one of the first things he told the board is, we know what happened in the past. I want to make today about Susan. Did you catch that?
Yes, I did. I thought that was very ironic because, again, in speaking with you ahead of time and what Tommy Pope had told you, that was exactly Tommy Pope's argument as to why she should stay incarcerated.
Exactly.
So I thought that was a bit ironic that her own defense attorney.
Her team saw that as a positive, yet when you speak with the victim's family, and those who prosecuted her, they see that as a negative, and the reason they want to make sure they keep her behind bars for the rest of her life. When you talk with David Smith, he is still he's grieving, and you and I talked about yesterday, he said you never get over this, you get through it. He really wants to talk and reach out and get messaging to the parents of children who have become victims of violence, parents who've lost children due to violence. He wants to know you have to keep putting one foot forward. He said the best thing that he has done is, quote, keep his nose clean. He didn't want any reproach upon Michael and Alex's name. And today in front of the board, I found it interesting that his wife of 21 years, Tiffany, they talked about their daughter, who Michael and Alex would have been her big brother. She mentioned that a little bit. But Tiffany, David's wife, said that they have been harder on her, more protective of her. They don't trust people. And that is all part of the mentality that this entire tragedy has put them into.
And her testimony, too, was very strong. Savannah Smith saying, what I had stolen from me was 2 older brothers, and I'll try to use my life as a way to live for them. Also, David's sister, Rebecca, saying that she has been so traumatized by this and telling a really emotional story about trying to pick up a new hobby of scuba diving, but that when she went under, suddenly Michael and Alex came back to her, and it gave her some impression of what that 3-year-old and 14-month-old must have felt like. But the real difficulty, I think, for all of them is that in 2 more years, they will be able to revisit this again for 2 more years, every 2 years, for the rest of Susan Smith's natural life.
I felt that it was bold. Everybody today said, we will be back here.
Yeah.
Every 2 years, we will be back here. Of course, the law has changed since Susan was sentenced. Life does now mean your natural born life. But for every 2 years moving forth, as long as she is alive, they said they will be back here to fight this, because not only is the legacy of Michael and Alex important to the Smiths and Tommy Pope and everybody who's been impacted by this, but justice. And the only justice they see is that Susan stays behind bars the rest of her life. I thought that one of David's comments was very poignant. He said, if she gets out today, and I'm paraphrasing, if she gets out today, that's only 15 years for each child, her children. And that hit me. I had not done the math like that, but that's a grieving father who has missed birthdays, graduations, weddings. They talked about that across the family, how this has ripped them apart, and there are certain times of year that they can barely get out of bed because they know what today would have been. But when David said if she got out today, it would have been only 15 years for each boy, that tugged at my heart.
And saying there, and that is not enough. I think it was also very important to note that the Union County Sheriff was here. Also Kevin Brackett, who is the 16th Circuit Solicitor that represents that area. And of course he was one of the solicitors, one of the prosecutors on that case. But those two people, real leaders in Union County, showing up to speak for the county. And it was mentioned over and over again. This is the thing when people say Union County, oh, that's the place where the lady drowned her 2 children. And Union County is so full of lovely, amazing people. And they just don't need to be remembered that way. And I felt like Kevin Brackett and also just the presence of the sheriff here was yet another way to state that.
I wanted to pull back and look at the big picture a little bit for people. We came out at 9 o'clock. As you mentioned, this was very reminiscent of the days of the search as well as the trial in Union. 30 years ago, you saw a very healthy, robust mix of local, regional, and national media, and that was everybody here again today. I felt like the difference was back then, everybody was so hungry for information. It was always a chase. Where's David? Where's Susan? Where's Sheriff Howard Wells, who was not only Susan's godfather, but investigating the case? Today, the difference to me was there was a calmness. And I think some of that was those of us who had been there before, it hits you. This is one of the most haunting, we heard that word again and again today. It's one of the most haunting cases that a number of us have ever covered, but everybody here, it was somber. It was much more quiet than it was after the search, after the trial, and then after her sentence.
Yes, it's also very interesting to look at the whole process, really. It's an opportunity to take a look at the court system. It's an opportunity to take a look at what people who are convicted of criminal offenses can be. Today, all of the hearings were for violent crimes. And just to see over and over how there is opportunity for restitution, there is opportunity for rehabilitation, but that is not an opportunity that Susan Smith has won today.
Not today.
And great force shown by the people who did not want that to happen.
As we watched about 10 to 12 different inmates go up prior to Susan, they each had their say, and the board would ask a lot of the same questions. How have you prepared for today? What would you say to the victims if you were able to speak to them? Neither side could hear the other. They would ask, were you on drugs and alcohol during the commitment
and
of
Susan
your
Smith
crime?
was asked that as well.
Yes, she
had
was.
had a
She
prior
was.
incident.
And as everybody wrapped up, and the inmate would be disconnected, and if there was victims' family statements, they would be disconnected on this virtual feed. The board made very quick decisions, very quick decisions. Granted, they go into this with a lot of paperwork. They know the past, the prior crime that the inmate is convicted of, yes. So, but it did surprise me how quickly that they would do their electronic roll call. Deny, 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 deny.
And in so many of these cases, in Susan Smith's case as well, 30 years, they say that time heals all things, but there are some things that don't heal. And certainly the murder, the completely senseless murder of 2 little boys, 3 and 14 months, did not make sense 30 years ago, and it does not make sense today. And it was so obvious, the very real depth of the pain, not just inflicted on their father, David, but generationally on his daughter, on his marriage, and even on the young people that we talked to today. Stephanie and I were kind of asking some of the younger people who were born after this happened, is this interesting for you? And they said, absolutely. It's incredible that someone could perpetrate this sort of a crime. And it's also incredible that 30 years later, they could be up for parole for this. So again, that was South Carolina law that has since been changed.
You think of the ripples, too, that this has impacted. You know the immediate ripple. Michael and Alex died. David Smith is grieving. His wife has got to live through the peaks and valleys, the days he can't get out of bed. There's the sister that didn't have the big brothers. But you also think of the bigger ripples ripples in the community, and we talk about the reputation. We've kind of hit that horse quite a bit today, haven't we, though? But a lot of people may not know 1 year after her trial, several families went to the lake to look at the monument for the Smith boys. They were part of the community. They loved those boys. They went out to look at the monument. While they were there, their Suburban rolled into the lake and 7 people died. It was a faulty transmission in the Suburban. It was loaded up with kids in car seats, ironically, and 7 people died. So you think of the ripples, they probably would not have been at the top of that boat ramp 1 year after the trial if Susan hadn't killed Michael and Alex.
I'm looking in my notes, and I'm not able to find exactly what Susan said. But at one point she did say something. One thing that sort of haunted a lot of people is that there were divers from the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources who found the bodies of the boys. And I will not describe his description. But Susan Smith did apologize to David on video or through her virtual call. And she also apologized to the people who found the boys. That to me was a little glimmer that perhaps she does realize that there was great trauma. Also, David's uncle, when he spoke, was very, very emotional and talked about he had driven down from Detroit and that David had wanted to see the boys' bodies, and that they had called David's uncle to the side and said, please understand, these little boys have been underwater for 9 days. This is not something David needs to see. Again, we don't need to paint a picture or see graphic detail, but it does describe the horror of what this actually looked like. And you have to kind of think maybe Susan Smith at some point in apologizing to those divers has thought about that.
Wow. Well, right now we do want to go inside what they've been calling the Central building all day long, where the PPP, the Parole, Probation, and Pardon Board has been, they are holding a news conference, and right now we will go to them and we'll report back later at 4, 5, and 6.
We'll actually get to that in just a second. Thanks so much, Jane Robelo and Stephanie Trotter. I want to talk, well, first of all, if you're just joining us, Susan Smith denied parole for the 1994 murder of her 2 boys in John D. Long Lake in Union County. John, I want to get to something Stephanie mentioned just a few minutes ago. You know, when Susan Smith got up and spoke and apologized in her video call, and then you had her attorney say this is all about Susan, that was a deliberate strategy, right?
Absolutely. It had to be that strategy of the fact of trying to show some sort of remorse and rehabilitation.
I want to get really quickly, we have that press conference now. We'll toss to that, the PPP press conference.
We are holding this press conference to provide further explanation of the parole hearing process. First, I'd like to introduce my acting director for the agency, Jody Gallman, who will speak today. And then I'd like to also introduce Associate Deputy Director for Paroles, Pardons, and Release Services, Valerie Suber, who will also be speaking with you today. Okay? So, first, Acting Director Gallman.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. First, I want to thank the entire executive management team. But behind me, you have some of the executive management team and some of the senior managers in the department. Secondly, I want to thank the department staff for everything that they do during the course of the year, and especially for the parole hearings and the pardon processes that we have in place. I want to give a special thanks to the Paroles, Pardon, and Release Services Division. Without that staff, the hearings could not take place. And next, for today, I want to especially thank what we are calling the Special Operations Team. Those were the different folks that you saw today in the uniform. Some just had their little badges on them, but that entire team of putting the work together for today. And lastly, I just want to thank the Parole Board. The Parole Board has difficult decisions that they have to make, as you witnessed some of the decisions that were made today. So we want to thank them for their services. And now we'll hear from Deputy Director Suber.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As stated, my name is Valerie Suber. I am the Associate Deputy Director for Paroles, Pardons, and Release Services. I'd like to first say thank you to Court Television for providing live streaming services today and for highlighting the parole process in the state of South Carolina. In South Carolina, we schedule roughly 3,000 inmates every year for parole consideration. Today, inmate Susan Smith, SCDC number 221487, was denied parole. This was by a unanimous decision of the board. One board member did recuse herself from this vote. The reasons for denial were identified as follows, and if we could hit this on the screen behind you is the graphic. The nature and seriousness of the current crime. Her institutional record is unfavorable. The inmate will be notified of the disposition of this hearing as well as the reasons for rejection. Inmate Smith will be eligible again for parole consideration in 2 years. Thank you.
Okay, do you have any questions? Yes.
Being that the reasons for her parole being denied were nature and seriousness of current offense and institutional records, does that mean when she comes back in 2 more years, the nature and seriousness of the current offense will be the reason that she's denied again? Like, will she just get denied for this?
I can't speak as to what will happen. It is a reason for denial, and the board may use that reason again in 2 years, yes.
And could they not use it? Like, could they decide to not look at the nature and seriousness of the current offense?
The board is an autonomous decision-making body. They make their decisions independent of this agency. They do have the discretion to grant parole as they see fit. So it is at their discretion that they grant or deny, and the reasons that they grant or deny are at their discretion as well.
Valerie, what was the nature of the conflict of the board member that excused herself for himself?
I have that statement here for you, and I will read it for you again as it was read onto the record. Be advised that I will recuse myself in the parole hearing of Susan Smith, number 221487. I was acting warden at Camille Graham Correctional Center in 1999, where inmate Smith was housed and subsequently transferred to Leith Correctional Institution. I have determined that it is appropriate to recuse to eliminate any appearance or affecting her opportunity for parole, and it is signed respectfully, Geraldine P. Miro, board member.
And we have a question here.
She actually just asked it.
She asked it? Okay. Anyone else have a question?
Thank you. I noticed that all of the parole hearings, all of the decisions were actually rejected. Is that normal?
Our parole rate for violent crimes is currently 8%, so there is not a high parole rate in South Carolina currently. So I guess in essence, that is pretty typical.
Another question? Yes.
Are there supposed to be 7 parole board members?
Yes, the board consists of 7 members appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. We do have 1 vacant seat that has been vacant since 2022. So that vacancy is not considered in the quorum. And then Ms. Miro recused herself, so there were 5 voting members in this hearing.
Why is that seat vacant?
Because the governor appoints and the Senate confirms, and that hasn't happened.
In recent years in the state of South Carolina, has there been an inmate who's granted parole with the seriousness of this nature of the crime?
Inmates have been granted parole who committed murders, and there are inmates currently on parole for life sentences, yes.
Any other questions? Yes.
What makes a difference the inmates who have committed murders or had life sentences were granted parole versus Susan Smith's case?
Again, the board grants parole at their discretion, and I will quote a statute for you because it is probably the most potent statute that I can reference. That is 2421-640. The board must carefully consider the record of a prisoner before, during, and after imprisonment, and no such prisoner may be paroled until it appears to the satisfaction of the board that the prisoner has shown a disposition to reform, that in the future he will probably obey the law and lead a correct life, that by his conduct he has merited a lessening of the rigors of his imprisonment, that the interest of society will not be impaired thereby, and that suitable employment has been secured for him. That is 2421-640. which gives the board complete discretion to grant or deny parole, and it is not until they are satisfied that these conditions are present that an inmate may be paroled. Yes.
So I didn't hear this discussed, but did Susan Smith have any like hard offers of employment if she would have been released, or has she satisfied that?
The employment offers are not verified until the person actually makes parole.
Was there anybody else besides the Currys that were in favor of her release? Like correspondence or anything like that?
I don't know who was in favor of parole. I think we've already reported out on the number of letters received, and I don't have any other information outside of that.
So just for, I'm sorry, how many letters were received?
There were 6, I believe.
6 that were for parole, and as of November 17th or 18th, it was 471 letters or correspondences received, because some were emailed. Okay?
And how is the inmate informed that whether or not they're paroled?
Our agency employs staff release examiners who are present at each institution, and they are advised of the outcome of the hearing at the time the decision is made at the prison.
I think I have one. Why is it like every 2 years to have a parole hearing? How does that work?
Okay, by statute, because of the time her crime was committed, she is eligible for parole every 2 years. There is a window where certain individuals are eligible every year, but because she is serving for a violent crime and the time she was convicted and her crime was committed, the law requires that she wait 2 years before she's considered again.
Just one more thing, folks. Several of you have asked me about the names of the persons that spoke during the Susan Smith hearing. So I'm going to give it to you right now. David Smith, Tiffany Smith, Savannah Smith, Douglas Smith, Rebecca Smith French. Rebecca is spelled R-E-B-E-C-K-A. And I believe it's former Representative Tommy Pope and Solicitor Kevin Brackett. Brackett, B-R-A-C-K-E-T-T. So those are pretty easy names. I think you got it. I know you got it. You won't be calling me tonight.
One question.
All right.
Savannah, is it with an H or without an H?
Savannah with an H.
Thank you.
All right.
The folks who spoke in favor of Smith, the Currys, is that C-U-R-R-Y or I-E?
Now, I do not have that. Who spoke in favor? Right, so they are registered with the South Carolina Department of Corrections. So yes, they would have that information for you. I want to thank you all for staying with us and coming here to this press conference today. We're going to also take you down the stairs, down the elevators in a very orderly fashion, just as you got up.
That was the Office of Probation, Parole, and Pardon holding a news conference on Susan Smith being denied parole for the 1994 murders of her 2 boys. John, I want to go back to a question that we asked right before that press conference began of what's next for Susan Smith's team. I mean, we heard from her that it was kind of a strategy in terms of deflecting away from the 1994 crime. Where does she go from here?
So they have to, by law, give a written opinion as to the reasons for the denial, setting forth the statute of what you heard. I think Ms. Suber was talking about some of the elements in there. And then they have the ability to appeal to administrative law court. Very, very limited reasons for an appeal. But one thing I caught on to was the fact that, and Carol and I were discussing, there was no deliberations amongst the panel members of the board. They immediately voted on each and every case, and their policy manual and their statute talks about deliberations of that board after they hear the evidence of all witnesses.
A new number that we just heard, and I think it was a little, shouldn't say unbelievable, but a little shocking. 471 letters were written in opposition of Susan Smith's release. Is that standard?
Oh, I don't think that's standard. I just think the high profileness of this case. And I think that obviously goes to one of the elements that the parole board has to consider, is that what effect is this going to have on the community? And if it has a negative effect, the parole board literally by statute has a duty to make sure that that individual is not released. So I think if anything was appealed in this case, some of these technicalities, I don't think that there would be any standing, and I think that this appeal board would be upheld.
And you know, David Smith has been on some podcasts on social media, and there were about 120 letters, I think, that have been sent to the parole board. But he made a plea on social media. He said, please do not let her get out of prison. Please, if you can, you know, support keeping her behind bars. And after that, it blew up. It went to over 300, and now we heard in this hearing from PPP that it's what, 471. So I think David Smith making the appeal to the public to help support them in keeping her behind bars worked.
If you're just now tuning in with us, we just have been airing throughout the morning and afternoon Susan Smith's parole hearing, which she was denied parole. That was the board's decision. Of course, if we have more information, we'll be posting it throughout the day and airing it on WYFF News 4 for extensive coverage